Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
The smell of burnt pot roast filled the cramped dining room as Marlo Vega cut through the tough meat on her plate. At 34, she had learned to stomach worse things than her mother's cooking. The chipped plates, the wobbly table leg, the faded wallpaper, all of it paid for with her money, though nobody at this table would admit it. Ellen Vega sat at the head of the table, like a queen holding court in her crumbling castle. At 58, her sharp features had hardened into permanent lines of disapproval. She picked at her food while surveying her children with the calculating gaze of someone always looking for weakness. "Pass the salt," Levon mumbled from across the table. At 38, Marlo's older brother had the soft look of a man who'd never done hard labor, but spent plenty of time complaining about it. His stubble was uneven, his shirt wrinkled, and his eyes held that familiar mixture of entitlement and resentment. Tina sat beside him, checking her phone between bites. At 31, she'd mastered the art of looking busy while contributing nothing. Her blonde highlights needed touching up, and her designer handbag, the one Marlo had secretly paid for, sat prominently on the counter, where everyone could see the logo. Riley, Tina's husband, flashed his practiced smile as he refilled wine glasses. Charming and smooth-talking, he had the kind of confidence that made people trust him with their wallets. Big mistake, as Marlo was beginning to suspect. Uncle Norris rounded out the group, Ellen's older brother who lived for gossip and drama like other people lived for oxygen. He leaned forward whenever conversations turned tense, ready to spread whatever he heard to anyone who'd listen. The conversation had been typically mundane weather, local news, complaints about this and that. But Marlo could feel something building. Ellen had that look, the one that meant she was about to say something cutting. "You know what I was thinking about today," Ellen said, setting down her fork with deliberate precision. Her voice carried that false sweetness that always preceded her worst comments. Marlo kept eating, not taking the bait. "I was thinking about how some people just never quite figure it out," Ellen continued. "How they reach a certain age and you realize they're just not going to make anything of themselves." The table grew quiet except for the scraping of forks against plates. Uncle Norris perked up like a dog hearing a dinner bell. "What do you mean, Mom?" Tina asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the direction this was heading. Ellen's smile widened. She looked directly at Marlo with those cold blue eyes that had been cutting people down for decades. "Marlo, honey," Ellen said, her voice dripping with mock concern. "How does it feel to be a loser at your age?" The words hit the table like a dropped plate. Levon snorted into his wine glass. Tina rolled her eyes and shook her head. Riley looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Uncle Norris practically vibrated with excitement. "I mean, look at you," Ellen continued, warming to her subject. 34 years old, no husband, no kids, living in that tiny apartment downtown. Your brother has his projects, Tina has her family, but you? What exactly do you have to show for your life? Marlo set down her fork slowly and looked up. Around the table, her family waited for her reaction like spectators at a boxing match. This was their entertainment, watching Ellen tear someone down while they cheered from the sidelines. "Come on, Ellen," Uncle Norris said with fake concern. "Don't be too hard on her. Not everyone can be successful." "It's just sad," Levon added, swirling his wine. "All that potential wasted. Remember how smart she used to be in school? I guess that doesn't count for much in the real world." "Maybe she'll figure it out eventually," Tina said, not looking up from her phone. "Though at her age, the clock's kind of ticking, isn't it?" Riley shifted in his seat. "Come on, guys. That's pretty harsh." "It's not harsh if it's true," Ellen said. "Sometimes people need to hear the truth about themselves. Marlo's always been too proud to admit when she's failing." Marlo had heard variations of this speech before. The constant criticism, the comparisons, the subtle and not so subtle put-downs designed to keep her in her place. But tonight felt different. Tonight, sitting in the house she'd been secretly paying the mortgage on, eating dinner bought with money she'd transferred to her mother's account, listening to people she'd been supporting for years call her a failure tonight, something inside her snapped. How does it feel to know this loser will no longer pay your bills? Marlo said quietly. The chatter died instantly. Ellen's smile faltered, then disappeared completely. Levon's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Tina finally looked up from her phone. Even Uncle Norris stopped grinning. "What did you say?" Ellen asked, her voice suddenly sharp. Marlo pushed back from the table and stood up. "You heard me. This loser who apparently has nothing to show for her life? She's done writing checks for this family." "Marlo, what are you talking about?" Tina asked, but her voice had lost its casual dismissiveness. "Your mortgage," Marlo said, looking directly at Ellen. "The one that's been mysteriously getting paid every month even though you haven't worked in 3 years. That's me." Ellen's face went pale. "You don't know what your car loan," Marlo continued, turning to Levon. "The credit card debt you racked up on those get-rich-quick schemes? Also me." Levon's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "And Tina," Marlo said, facing her sister, "those emergencies that always seem to pop up right before rent is due? The ones that somehow cost exactly what you need to make ends meet? Guess who's been your safety net?" The silence stretched until Uncle Norris cleared his throat. "Now hold on." "No," Marlo said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "I'm done holding on. I'm done pretending this family functions on anything other than my money and your entitlement." Ellen found her voice first, rising from her chair with indignation. "How dare you speak to your family like this, after everything we've done for you?" "What exactly have you done for me?" Marlo asked. "Tell me one thing any of you have done for me in the last 5 years that didn't involve asking for money." The question hung in the air unanswered because they all knew the truth. "You're just upset because we told you some hard truths," Levon said, trying to regain his footing. "That doesn't mean you should throw a tantrum." "A tantrum?" Marlo laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, this isn't a tantrum. This is a business decision. And the business of supporting ungrateful people who think I'm a loser is officially closed." She walked toward the door, grabbing her coat from the back of a chair. "Where are you going?" Ellen demanded. "We're not finished here." Marlo turned back to face them one last time. Her family sat around the table looking shocked and confused, as if they couldn't understand how their favorite target had suddenly grown claws. "Actually, we are finished," Marlo said. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one I'll be paying for." The door slammed behind her, leaving them in stunned silence. Marlo's downtown loft felt like stepping into another world after the suffocating atmosphere of her mother's house. Clean lines, modern furniture, and actual space to breathe. She kicked off her shoes and poured herself a glass of wine from a bottle that cost more than her family spent on groceries in a week. Sitting at her desk, she opened her laptop and pulled up the financial spreadsheets she'd been maintaining for years. The numbers told the story she'd never spoken aloud, thousands of dollars flowing from her accounts to theirs, month after month, year after year. Her software licensing business had been quietly successful for over a decade. A program she'd co-developed in college had found its niche in mid-sized companies, generating steady royalties that had grown substantially over time. She lived modestly, invested wisely, and had built a comfortable financial cushion that most people her age could only dream of. But her family knew none of this. As far as they were concerned, she was just Marlo, the daughter who'd never quite lived up to her potential, the sister who couldn't keep a relationship together, the disappointment who worked some vague tech job that barely paid the bills she'd encouraged this fiction by living below her means and never correcting their assumptions. It was easier that way, easier than dealing with the constant requests for loans that would never be repaid, The expectation that success should be shared with family regardless of how that family treated you. The financial support had started small. Right after college, when their father had abandoned the family for a younger woman and a fresh start in Florida. Marlo remembered that day, clearly sitting in the same house while Ellen cried and raged about bills and mortgages and how they were going to survive. "You're the strong one," Ellen had said, gripping Marlo's hands with desperate fingers. "You've always been the strong one. We're going to need you to help us through this." And Marlo had helped. A few hundred here, 1,000 there, just until they got back on their feet, just until Ellen found work, just until Levon finished his latest project, just until Tina's husband got that promotion, except none of those things ever happened. Ellen never looked for work. Levon's projects never panned out. Riley's promotion never materialized. The temporary help became permanent support, and somehow Marlo had become the family ATM. The worst part wasn't the money she could afford it. The worst part was how they treated her despite it, like she was lucky to be included, like they were doing her a favor by letting her pay their bills, like her contributions were so small and insignificant that they barely merited acknowledgement. She pulled up Ellen's checking account, the one she'd been quietly depositing money into for 3 years. The mortgage payment, utilities, groceries, insurance, all covered by transfers from Marlo's business account. Ellen had access to the account, but had never asked where the money came from. She'd simply spent it and assumed it would keep coming. Levon's debt spreadsheet was more complicated. Car payments, credit cards, personal loans for business ventures that never materialized. He'd come to her with sob stories about missed opportunities and bad luck, always with a plan for how he'd pay her back once things turned around. Things never turned around, but the debts kept growing. Tina's expenses were the most irregular, but also the most frequent. Emergency rent payments, medical bills, car repairs, unexpected expenses that always seemed to surprise her despite their predictable regularity. Riley's income was apparently too unreliable to cover these basics, leaving Tina to call Marlo with tearful explanations about why she needed help. All told, Marlo had spent over $200,000 supporting her family in the past decade. Money that could have bought her a house, funded her own dreams, or simply sat in her accounts, growing interest. Instead, it had disappeared into the black hole of their financial irresponsibility and ingratitude. She closed the laptop and finished her wine. Tomorrow, she would start the process of cutting them off completely. No more transfers, no more emergency funds, no more safety net. They wanted to call her a loser? Fine. They could see how well they managed without this loser's help. The next morning, Marlo sat at her kitchen table with coffee and her laptop, composing the emails that would change everything. She'd thought about this moment for months, but had never quite worked up the courage to follow through. Last night's dinner had provided all the motivation she needed. The first email went to Ellen *, Mom. Effective immediately, I will no longer be providing any financial assistance to you or anyone else in the family. This includes the mortgage payments, utility bills, and grocery money that have been coming from my accounts for the past several years. I have removed your access to the joint checking account and canceled all automatic transfers. You have until the end of this month to make alternative arrangements for your expenses. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Marlo * short, direct, and impossible to misinterpret. She sent it before she could second-guess herself. The second email went to Levon * Levon. I will no longer be making payments on your car loan, credit cards, or any other debts. The last payment I will make is this month's car payment, which I've already submitted. After that, you are responsible for your own financial obligations. I will not be providing any loans, gifts, or emergency funds going forward. Marlo * the third email went to Tina * Tina. I wanted to let you know that I will no longer be able to help with your emergency expenses or any other financial needs. This includes rent payments, medical bills, car repairs, or any other unexpected costs. This change is effective immediately. Marlo * she sent all 3 emails within 5 minutes of each other, then closed her laptop and went to make another cup of coffee. Her phone started ringing within an hour. Ellen called first, her voice shaking with rage. What the hell is this email supposed to mean? Ellen demanded without preamble. It means exactly what it says, Marlowe replied calmly. I'm done paying your bills. You can't just cut us off without warning. We have obligations, responsibilities. So do I. And my responsibility to myself comes first now. This is about last night, isn't it? You're having some kind of breakdown because we told you a few hard truths. Marlowe almost laughed. Hard truths? You called me a loser while sitting in a house I've been paying for, eating food I bought, planning to continue living off money I earn. If anyone needs to hear some hard truths, it's not me. I never asked you to pay for anything, Ellen said, but her voice lacked conviction. You never asked because you never had to. You just expected it. Well, now you can expect something else. You're being cruel and vindictive. This isn't like you. Maybe this is exactly like me, and you never bothered to notice because you were too busy spending my money. Ellen's voice turned pleading. Honey, I know we hurt your feelings, but this is going too far. Family doesn't abandon family. You're right, Marlowe said. Family doesn't abandon family, but they also don't treat family like garbage while expecting them to pay for the privilege. She hung up before Ellen could respond. Levon called an hour later, his approach more aggressive. What's this bullshit email about cutting me off? He demanded. It's not bullshit. It's information. I thought you'd want to know before your car got repossessed. You can't just stop paying my bills because you had a fight with Mom. I can do whatever I want with my money. That's how money works. This is insane. We're family. You're supposed to help family. When exactly have you helped me, Levon? What have you contributed to this family besides debt and complaints? I'm working on projects that could. No, Marlowe cut him off. You're working on excuses. You always have been. The only difference is now you'll have to find someone else to pay for them. You'll regret this. You'll end up alone and miserable, and when you come crawling back, don't expect us to welcome you with open arms. I'm already alone, Marlowe said. At least now I won't be paying for the privilege. Levon's response was a stream of obscenities before he hung up. Tina's call came last, and her approach was different tears instead of anger. Marlowe, I don't understand this email. What's going on? I think the email was pretty clear. But why? What did I do wrong? I know Mom and Levon can be harsh sometimes, but I've always been nice to you. Being nice isn't the same as being grateful, Tina. And being family isn't the same as being entitled to my money. I never thought of it as entitlement. I thought we were just helping each other. When have you helped me? When have any of you helped me with anything? Silence on the other end of the line. That's what I thought, Marlowe continued. You've all been happy to take my help, but none of you have ever offered any in return. That's not family helping family. That's one person being used by everyone else. But what am I supposed to do? Riley's work has been slow, and we barely make enough to cover. You're supposed to figure it out like every other adult in the world. Get a second job, cut expenses, ask Riley to find better work. Do something other than calling me every time life gets difficult. You're really going to abandon us. I'm not abandoning you. I'm stopping enabling you. There's a difference. After Tina hung up, Marlowe turned off her phone and spent the rest of the day in peace. She worked on client projects, went for a long walk, and cooked herself a nice dinner. For the first time in years, she ate without feeling guilty about the money she was spending on herself instead of her family. That evening, she checked her email and found exactly what she expected. Ellen had sent a long, rambling message about family loyalty and how disappointed she was in Marlowe's selfishness. Levon had sent a short, sarcastic note about how she'd regret this decision when she realized how much she needed them. Tina had forwarded a passive-aggressive quote about forgiveness that she'd probably found on social media. Uncle Norris had sent his own message, clearly having heard about the situation from Ellen. It was full of advice about family harmony and how money shouldn't come between relatives. easy words from someone who'd never contributed a penny to anyone's welfare. Marlo deleted all the messages without responding. They could send all the guilt trips they wanted. She was done feeling guilty for their problems. 3 weeks after Marlo cut off the money, the retaliation began. She first noticed it at the coffee shop downtown where she usually grabbed her morning caffeine. Janet, the owner, gave her a strange look when she walked in. "Hey, Marlo," Janet said, but her voice carried an odd note of sympathy. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Marlo replied, puzzled. "Why?" "Oh, with your business troubles and everything. Your mom mentioned you've been having a hard time." Marlo's blood chilled. "My mom mentioned what?" "She was in here yesterday with her book club. Said your company went under and you're having financial problems." "I'm sorry, honey. These things happen." "My company didn't go under," Marlo said carefully. "I'm not having financial problems." Janet looked uncomfortable. "Oh, well, maybe I misunderstood what she said." But Marlo knew Janet hadn't misunderstood anything. Ellen was spreading lies about her financial situation, trying to damage her reputation in their small town. It was a classic Ellen move. If she couldn't control Marlo with guilt, she'd try to destroy her with gossip. The next attack came through professional channels. Marlo had been negotiating a contract with Thompson Manufacturing, a local company that wanted to license her software for their inventory management. She'd been working with their IT director, Mike Stevens, for weeks on the details. Mike called that afternoon to cancel the deal. "I'm sorry, Marlo, but we've decided to go with a different solution," he said, sounding embarrassed. "Can I ask what changed? Yesterday, you seemed excited about moving forward." "Well, I ran into your brother at Murphy's bar last night. He mentioned that you might not be the most reliable vendor right now. Said you were going through some personal issues that might affect your ability to deliver." Marlo gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of personal issues?" "He didn't get specific. Just said the family was worried about you and that maybe we should wait to see how things shake out." "Mike, I can assure you that my personal life has no impact on my professional obligations. I've been in business for over 10 years without a single delivery problem." "I'm sure that's true, but the company prefers to avoid any potential complications. We've decided to go with a larger firm from Columbus." After Mike hung up, Marlo sat staring at her phone. Levon had deliberately sabotaged her business deal. He'd gone out of his way to find someone she was working with and poison the relationship. This wasn't just retaliation, it was warfare. The third attack came through her social circle. Marlo didn't have many close friends, but she'd built relationships with several people in town over the years. She discovered the extent of her family's campaign when she ran into Beth Morrison at the grocery store. Beth had always been friendly, but today she seemed nervous and kept the conversation awkwardly brief. As Marlo was leaving, she overheard Beth talking to another woman near the checkout. "That's her," Beth was saying quietly. "Tina told me she's been having some kind of breakdown. Apparently she's been acting erratic and paranoid. The family's really worried about her mental state." Marlo felt anger surge through her veins. They weren't just attacking her finances and reputation, they were questioning her sanity. It was a brilliant strategy in its cruelty. If anyone challenged their version of events, they could just say she was unstable and couldn't be trusted to tell the truth about her own life. She drove home in a rage, her hand shaking on the steering wheel. They wanted to play dirty. They had no idea what dirty looked like. They'd spent years taking her money while treating her like garbage, and now they were trying to destroy her life because she'd finally stood up for herself. But Marlo had advantages they didn't know about. Money was one, she had plenty, and they were about to run out. Intelligence was another. She'd built a successful business while they struggled with basic life skills. But the biggest advantage was that she'd been supporting them for so long. She knew exactly where their weaknesses were. By the time she reached her apartment, her anger had crystallized into something sharper and more focused. They wanted a war. She'd give them one. But unlike their clumsy attempts at character assassination, her approach would be surgical, strategic, and absolutely devastating. Marlowe had known Kelton Drury for 8 years, ever since she'd helped him land his first major cybersecurity contract. He was brilliant with computers but terrible with people, which made him perfect for what she needed. His consulting business had grown substantially since then, and he owed her a favor. She called him from her apartment that evening. "Marlowe," Kelton said, his voice brightening. "Good to hear from you. How's business?" "Good, thanks. Listen, I need to ask you for a favor." "Anything. You know that. I need some research done on my family members. Nothing illegal, just information that's publicly available. Background checks, financial records, that sort of thing." Kelton paused. "Everything okay?" "Let's just say some family dynamics have gotten complicated, and I need to understand what I'm dealing with." "I can do that. Who are we looking at?" Marlowe gave him the names and basic information for Ellen, Levon, Tina, and Riley. She also mentioned Uncle Norris, though she suspected he was just a gossip spreader rather than a real threat. "How deep do you want me to go?" Kelton asked. "As deep as you can without breaking any laws. I need to know about debts, legal troubles, employment history, anything that might be relevant. This is going to take a few days. Is that okay?" "Perfect. And Kelton, this stays between us." "Of course." 3 days later, Kelton called back with results that exceeded Marlowe's expectations. "You want the bad news or the really bad news first?" he asked. "Start with bad and work your way up. Your brother Levon has been embezzling from the Veterans Relief Fund. I found discrepancies in their financial records going back 18 months. Small amounts at first, but getting larger. He's been using his position as volunteer treasurer to skim donations." Marlowe felt a chill run down her spine. Stealing from veterans was about as low as a person could go, even for Levon. "How much are we talking about?" "Close to $15,000 total. He's been good at covering his tracks, but the pattern is clear once you know what to look for." "What's the really bad news?" "Your sister's husband has a serious gambling problem. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips to West Virginia. He's run up massive debts and has been hiding them from your sister. I found evidence that he's been using her credit cards and even took out loans in her name." "How massive?" $80,000, maybe more. And that's just what I could track down. There might be debts with private lenders that don't show up in official records." Marlowe absorbed this information. Riley had seemed charming but irresponsible. She hadn't realized he was actively stealing from his own wife. "What about my mother?" "Ellen's got her own problems. She's been claiming income from a house-sitting business that she never reported to the IRS. Cash payments, no receipts, no taxes paid. We're talking about $40,000 over 3 years. How did you find that?" "She's been advertising her services on local Facebook groups. I cross-referenced her posts with property management companies and found several clients who paid her cash for extended house-sitting gigs." Marlowe leaned back in her chair. Her family wasn't just irresponsible, they were criminals. Embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion. Any one of these revelations could destroy them individually. Together, they represented enough ammunition to obliterate the entire family's reputation and financial stability. "Kelton, this is incredibly thorough work. I owe you more than one favor now. Just promise me you'll be careful how you use this information. Some of these people could face serious legal consequences." "That's kind of the point," Marlowe said quietly. After she hung up, Marlowe printed out all the documentation Kelton had sent her. Bank records, loan applications, tax forms, payment histories, everything laid out in meticulous detail. Her family had called her a loser while simultaneously breaking laws and defrauding institutions. The irony was almost funny, but Marlowe wasn't laughing. She was planning that Marlowe's first strike was against Levon, and it was devastatingly simple. She printed out copies of the financial evidence, showing his embezzlement from the Veterans Relief Fund, and mailed them anonymously to the fund's board of directors. No covering letter, no explanation, just the raw data showing how their trusted treasurer had been stealing from disabled veterans. She mailed the package on a Tuesday and waited. The call came Friday afternoon. Levon's voice was panicked and desperate. "Someone's trying to frame me," he said without preamble. "The VRF board got some fake documents that make it look like I've been stealing from them." "That's terrible," Marlo said, keeping her voice neutral. "What kind of documents?" "Bank records, deposit slips, all kinds of financial stuff. But it's all fabricated. Someone's trying to destroy me." "Who would do something like that?" "I don't know, but they're going to investigate. They've suspended me pending a full audit. This could ruin my reputation in town." "Well, if the documents are fake, the investigation will prove that, right?" Silence on the other end of the line. "Levon, the documents are fake, aren't they?" "Of course they're fake," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I would never steal from veterans. You know that." But Marlo did know she knew exactly what he was capable of when he thought no one was watching. "I'm sure it will all work out," she said. "These things usually do." She hung up before he could respond. The second strike targeted Riley's gambling debts. Marlo had noticed that Tina seemed unaware of the extent of her husband's problems, so she decided to enlighten her. She compiled copies of Riley's credit card statements, loan applications, and betting records, then mailed them to Tina at her workplace with a note. "Thought you should know what your husband has been doing with your credit cards and personal information. A concerned friend." Tina called 3 days later, sobbing. "Marlo, I need to talk to someone. My whole world is falling apart." "What's wrong?" "It's Riley. I found out he's been gambling with our money. Lots of money. Money we don't have." "How much money?" "Tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. He took out loans in my name, used my credit cards, even borrowed against my car. I had no idea." Marlo made appropriate sympathetic noises while Tina cried and raged about betrayal and lies. "What are you going to do?" Marlo asked. "I don't know. I can't trust him anymore. I can't even look at him. How could he do this to us?" "Maybe you should talk to a lawyer about protecting yourself financially." "I think I'm going to leave him. I can't stay married to someone who would steal from me." "That sounds like a wise decision." After Tina hung up, Marlo felt a moment of something that might have been guilt. But then she remembered Tina's casual cruelty at the dinner table, her assumption that Marlo's problems were funny, her willingness to join in Ellen's attacks. If Tina's marriage was falling apart, it was because her husband was a thief and a liar. Marlo had just provided the evidence. The third strike was the most satisfying. Marlo gathered all the documentation of Ellen's unreported income and mailed it to the IRS fraud hotline. Tax evasion was a federal crime, and the government took it seriously. She included a detailed letter explaining the pattern of cash payments and deliberate concealment. Unlike the other revelations, this one would take time to develop. The IRS moved slowly but thoroughly. Ellen wouldn't know what hit her until it was too late to fix it. But Marlo didn't want to wait for federal bureaucracy to deliver justice. She wanted Ellen to understand that her actions had consequences right now. She made one more move. She printed out copies of Ellen's tax documents and financial records, along with evidence of her house-sitting income, and mailed them to key members of Ellen's social circle. The book club president, the church treasurer, the head of the neighborhood association, people who would be scandalized by tax fraud and wouldn't hesitate to spread the word. Ellen called the next week, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "Someone is spreading lies about me around town. Terrible lies about taxes and money." "What kind of lies?" Marlo asked. "They're saying I haven't been paying taxes on my house-sitting income. It's completely false, but people are believing it." "Have you been paying taxes on that income?" "That's not the point. The point is that someone is trying to destroy my reputation with fabricated documents." "Mom," If you've been earning unreported income, that's tax evasion. That's not a fabricated accusation, that's a crime. I haven't done anything wrong. Then you have nothing to worry about. The truth will come out. Ellen's voice turned suspicious. You sound awfully calm about this, like you already knew about it. I'm always calm. Unlike some people, I don't panic when problems arise. Problems don't just arise out of nowhere. Someone is behind this, and when I find out who. What? What will you do? Call them a loser? Send them angry emails? I'm sure that will fix everything. Ellen's sharp intake of breath told Marlowe that her point had hit home. You think this is funny. I think it's ironic. You've spent weeks trying to destroy my reputation with lies, and now someone's destroying yours with the truth. This conversation is over. For once, we agree on something. As Marlowe hung up, she felt a deep satisfaction settle into her bones. Her family had declared war on her reputation and livelihood, but they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd assumed she was weak and defenseless. They'd forgotten that the person they were attacking had been supporting them financially for years, which meant she knew exactly where all their bodies were buried. The best part was that everything she'd revealed was true. She hadn't fabricated evidence or spread lies. She'd simply brought their own actions into the light and let the consequences follow naturally. They'd called her a loser while committing crimes and defrauding institutions. Now, they could deal with the fallout while she watched from a safe distance, finally free from their endless demands and casual cruelty. The war was far from over, but the first battles had been decisively won. The dominoes began falling faster than Marlowe had anticipated. Within 2 weeks of her strategic strikes, her family's carefully constructed lives started crumbling in spectacular fashion. That Levon's downfall was the most public. The Veterans Relief Fund Board didn't just suspend him, they filed a formal complaint with the police and issued a press release detailing the embezzlement. The local newspaper picked up the story, running it on the front page with the headline, "Local Man Accused of Stealing from Veterans." Marlowe read the article online while drinking her morning coffee. The reporter had done thorough work, interviewing several board members who expressed shock and disappointment at Levon's betrayal. One veteran, a man who'd lost both legs in Afghanistan, was quoted saying he felt personally violated by someone stealing from disabled soldiers. The story went viral on local social media. People who'd never heard of Levon Vega suddenly knew him as the man who stole from veterans. His photo was shared hundreds of times, usually accompanied by angry comments about honor and patriotism. Marlowe's phone rang while she was reading the comments. "This is all your fault," Levon snarled without preamble. "You did this to me. I didn't steal $15,000 from veterans. That was all you. You sent them those documents. I know it was you. Actually, I have no idea who sent them those documents. But whoever it was apparently thought the veterans deserved to know where their donations were really going. My life is ruined. Do you understand that? I can't show my face in this town. People are calling me a traitor. Maybe you should have thought about that before you became a traitor. I needed the money. You cut me off and I had bills to pay. What was I supposed to do? Get a job like every other adult in America. Novel concept, I know. You think you're so smart, but this isn't over. When I prove you're behind this, you'll what? Steal money from more veterans to pay for a lawyer." Levon's response was a string of obscenities before he hung up. Tina's marriage imploded even more dramatically. Riley had initially tried to deny the gambling debts, claiming the evidence was fabricated. But when Tina started calling the creditors and casinos listed in the documents, the truth became undeniable. The confrontation happened at their house on a Saturday afternoon. Marlowe heard about it from multiple sources: neighbors who'd witnessed the screaming match, friends who'd seen Tina's Facebook posts, and Uncle Norris, who'd rushed over like a gossip-seeking missile as soon as he heard the drama was unfolding. According to the various accounts, Tina had thrown Riley's belongings onto the front lawn while he begged for forgiveness. She'd changed the locks, emptied their joint bank account, and filed for divorce that Monday. Riley was staying at a motel across town, trying to avoid the loan sharks who'd started calling when he couldn't make his payments. Ellen called Marlo that evening, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Your sister's marriage is over. Are you happy now?" "I'm not happy or unhappy about it. It's not my marriage. Don't pretend you didn't have anything to do with this." Somehow Tina got hold of financial records that showed Riley's gambling debts. Records that mysteriously appeared right after you cut us off. Maybe Riley should have mentioned the $80,000 in secret debts before Tina found out about them. Families work through problems together. They don't destroy each other over money. You're right about that. Families work through problems together. But Tina's problem was being married to a compulsive gambler who was stealing from her. I'd say divorcing him is working through that problem pretty effectively. You've turned into someone I don't recognize. I've turned into someone who doesn't pay other people's bills while they treat me like garbage. If you don't recognize that person, maybe you never really knew me at all. Ellen's own problems were mounting more slowly, but just as inevitably. The IRS had received the anonymous tip about her unreported income and opened an investigation. A federal agent had called to schedule an interview, sending Ellen into a panic that manifested as increasingly frantic phone calls to anyone who would listen. But worse than the federal investigation was the social fallout. Ellen's reputation in their small town had always been built on the appearance of moral superiority. She was the woman who knew everyone's business, who passed judgment on other people's choices, who positioned herself as the arbiter of proper behavior. Now everyone knew she was a tax cheat. The book club asked her to step down from her leadership position. The church quietly removed her from the finance committee. Neighbors who'd once sought her opinion on community matters suddenly had other things to do when she approached. Uncle Norris, ever the opportunist, distanced himself from the family drama. He'd enjoyed watching Ellen tear other people down, but being associated with scandal was bad for his own social standing. He stopped coming to family dinners and started spreading rumors that he'd always suspected something was off about Ellen's finances. Marlo monitored the chaos from her downtown loft, feeling like a general watching enemy positions collapse through high-powered binoculars. She'd expected retaliation, but her family seemed too busy dealing with the consequences of their own actions to mount any coordinated response. The few attempts they made were pathetic. Levon tried to get people to believe that Marlo had framed him, but his story made no sense. How would she have access to his bank records? Why would she fabricate evidence against her own brother? And if the documents were fake, why couldn't he explain where the missing money had actually gone? Tina's approach was more subtle. She started telling people that Marlo had somehow known about Riley's gambling and had deliberately kept it secret to watch their marriage fail. But this backfired when people pointed out that Marlo hadn't been talking to the family for weeks before the revelations came out. Ellen tried to position herself as the victim of a conspiracy, but her credibility was shot. When someone who'd been caught evading taxes claimed they were being persecuted, it sounded like exactly what it was: the desperate lies of someone trying to avoid responsibility. The call came on a Thursday evening in late November. Ellen's voice was different, older, more fragile, stripped of its usual commanding tone. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "We're talking now. Face to face, as a family. There are things that need to be said." Marlo almost laughed. "I can't imagine what those things might be. Please, just come to dinner Sunday, like we used to do." "You mean like the dinner where you called me a loser? That's how we used to do it." "Please," Ellen repeated, and there was something broken in her voice that Marlo had never heard before. Against her better judgment, Marlo agreed. She told herself it was curiosity. She wanted to see how far they'd fallen. But part of her, the part that had spent years trying to earn their love and approval, wanted to hear what they had to say now that their world was collapsing. Sunday dinner was a shadow of its former self. The dining room felt smaller and shabbier than Marlo remembered. The table that had once hosted Ellen's imperious pronouncements now bore the weight of defeat. Ellen sat at the head of the table, looking haggard. Her clothes were clean, but wrinkled. Her hair less carefully styled than usual. The confident woman who'd held court in this room just months earlier had been replaced by someone who looked every one of her 58 years. Levon slouched in his usual chair, avoiding eye contact. His face was gaunt, and his clothes hung loose on his frame. The stress of the criminal investigation and public humiliation had clearly taken a physical toll. Tina sat across from him, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Her designer handbag was gone, replaced by a worn purse that had seen better days. The divorce proceedings were apparently not going well. Riley had disappeared, leaving her responsible for debts she hadn't known existed. Uncle Norris was notably absent. When pressed, Ellen muttered something about him being busy with other commitments. Marlowe translated this to mean he'd abandoned ship as soon as the scandal broke. The meal was a dismal affair. Store-brand food, instead of the name brands Ellen had always insisted on. Cheap wine that tasted like vinegar. Conversation that died as soon as it started, leaving only the sound of forks scraping against plates. Finally, Ellen put down her utensils and looked directly at Marlowe. "I know you did this to us," she said quietly. "Did what?" "Sent those documents to the Veterans Fund. Told Tina about Riley's gambling. Reported me to the IRS. Marlowe met her gaze steadily. "Can you prove any of that?" "I don't need proof. I know. Knowing and proving are different things. Just like suspecting someone of tax evasion and actually catching them are different things." Ellen's jaw tightened. "You're destroying your own family over money." "I'm not destroying anything. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own choices." Levon looked up from his plate for the first time. "You realize they're going to prosecute me? I could go to prison because of what you did. You could go to prison because you stole money from disabled veterans. I had nothing to do with that decision. If I hadn't cut you off, you'd still be stealing from veterans and blaming someone else when you got caught. At least this way, you only have yourself to blame." Tina spoke for the first time since Marlowe had arrived. "How could you know about Riley's gambling and not tell me?" "I didn't know about Riley's gambling until after you found out. But even if I had known, why would I tell you? When exactly have you ever cared about my problems enough to warn me about anything?" "That's different." "How is it different?" "Because we're family." Marlowe looked around the table at these people who shared her DNA but had never shared her burdens. Family. They used the word like a magic spell that would make her forget years of criticism, manipulation, and casual cruelty. "You want to talk about family?" Marlowe said, her voice growing stronger. "Let's talk about family. Family doesn't call each other losers while cashing their checks. Family doesn't spread lies to destroy someone's reputation. Family doesn't steal from veterans or hide gambling debts or evade taxes and then act shocked when there are consequences." "We made mistakes," Ellen said, "but that doesn't mean you should abandon us when we need you most." "I didn't abandon you. I stopped enabling you. There's a difference. You could have talked to us, tried to work things out." "I tried to work things out for 10 years. I paid your bills and covered your debts and listened to your complaints, and all I got in return was criticism and contempt. When exactly was I supposed to feel like we'd work things out?" Levon's voice turned ugly. "So this is revenge? You're destroying our lives because your feelings got hurt." "This isn't revenge. Revenge would be me doing something terrible to you. This is justice. I'm letting you face the natural consequences of your own actions without my money protecting you from reality." "You're heartless," Tina said, tears starting to flow again. "I'm losing my house. Levon might go to jail. Mom could face federal charges. And you're just sitting there like none of it matters." "It matters," Marlowe said calmly. "It matters that you're finally dealing with problems instead of expecting me to solve them. It matters that Levon is facing consequences for stealing from veterans. It matters that Mom might actually have to pay the taxes she owes like every other citizen. Ellen leaned forward, her voice turning desperate. What do you want from us? An apology. We're sorry. We're all sorry. Is that enough? Can we move past this? Marlowe studied her mother's face. Even now, even with her world crumbling around her, Ellen didn't really understand what she'd done wrong. The apology was just another manipulation, another attempt to get what she wanted without actually changing anything. What I want, Marlowe said slowly, is for you to understand that I don't owe you anything. I don't owe you money or support or forgiveness or even my presence at this table. I don't owe you anything because family isn't about debt and obligation. It's about love and respect and mutual support. And none of you have ever given me any of those things. She stood up and pushed back from the table. Where are you going? Ellen demanded, panic creeping into her voice. Anywhere but here. We're not finished, Levon said, half rising from his chair. Actually, we are finished, Marlowe replied, echoing the words she'd spoken months earlier. We've been finished for a long time. I just finally had the courage to admit it. She walked toward the door, leaving them sitting in their ruined dining room with their cold food and broken dreams. Don't you walk away from us, Ellen called after her. Don't you dare walk away from your family. Marlowe paused at the door and turned back one last time. You're not my family. You're people who happen to be related to me. There's a difference. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the end of an era point 2 months later. Marlowe stood in the modern conference room of her new Austin office, looking out at the city skyline while her business partner reviewed contracts with their expanded team. The move to Texas had been easier than she'd expected. Her software business was location independent, and Austin's tech scene offered opportunities that small-town Ohio never could. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kelton. Thought you'd want to know Levon pled guilty yesterday. 18 months in federal prison, plus restitution. Marlowe felt a brief flicker of something that might have been satisfaction, but mostly she felt nothing at all. Levon's fate had been sealed the moment he decided to steal from veterans. She'd simply provided the evidence that brought his crimes to light. The federal charges against Ellen had resulted in a plea deal, 3 years of probation, and a substantial fine that had forced her to sell the house. She was living in a small apartment across town, working part-time at a grocery store to make ends meet. According to Kelton, she'd aged 10 years in the past 6 months. Tina had managed to avoid bankruptcy, but barely. She was working 2 jobs to pay off Riley's debts while living in a studio apartment. Riley himself had fled the state, leaving behind a trail of angry creditors and no forwarding address. Uncle Norris had moved to Florida, claiming he needed a change of scenery. Marlowe suspected he just wanted to escape the social fallout from being associated with the family scandals. None of them had tried to contact her since that final dinner. She'd heard through mutual acquaintances that they blamed her for everything that had happened, but they seemed to understand that bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt. Marlowe. Her business partner's voice brought her back to the present, ready for the client presentation. She turned away from the window and smiled. Absolutely. The presentation went perfectly. Their prospective client, a mid-sized manufacturing company, was impressed by both the software capabilities and the professional team Marlowe had assembled. By the end of the meeting, they'd signed a 6-figure contract that would fund the next phase of expansion. After the clients left, Marlowe's team gathered for drinks to celebrate. These people-intelligent, hard-working professionals who treated her with respect and valued her contributions felt more like family than her actual relatives ever had. That evening, alone in her downtown apartment, Marlowe opened a bottle of expensive wine and reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 18 months ago, she'd been trapped in a cycle of financial abuse, supporting people who despised her while sacrificing her own dreams for their comfort. Now she was free. Free from their endless demands, their casual cruelty, their assumption that her success existed solely for their benefit. Free to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. free to use her money for her own goals instead of covering other people's mistakes. Some people might call her heartless for walking away from family. But those people had never lived with the constant criticism, the subtle manipulation, the way her relatives could make her feel small and worthless even, while cashing checks she'd written she'd learned something important about loyalty during those dark months. Real loyalty wasn't about blind obedience to blood relatives who treated you poorly. Real loyalty was about standing up for yourself when no one else would. It was about refusing to enable destructive behavior, even when it came from people you'd once loved. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed her old Ohio area code, but she didn't recognize the number. For a moment, she considered answering. Maybe it was someone from her past life reaching out to reconnect. Then she declined the call and blocked the number. Whatever connections she'd once had to that place, and those people were gone now, severed as cleanly as a surgeon's blade. She had no interest in revisiting old wounds or reopening old arguments. Outside her window, Austin hummed with energy and possibility. Tomorrow she had meetings with 2 more potential clients, lunch with a venture capitalist who was interested in funding their next product, and dinner with friends who actually enjoyed her company. IT was a good life. A life built on her own terms, funded by her own success, shared with people who valued her for who she was rather than what she could provide them. Marlo raised her wine glass in a silent toast to the woman she'd become strong enough to walk away from toxicity, smart enough to build something better, and finally free from the weight of other people's expectations. "They taught me that family means loyalty," she said aloud, echoing words she'd spoken months earlier. "I taught them loyalty is earned." The words rang through her empty apartment like a benediction, the final verdict on a war she'd never wanted but had definitively won.